In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 strategies that you can use and I've used with over 100 students to improve their time management, and I'm going to be throwing in a bonus technique at the end to help you implement them. But before we do that, I'm going to be sharing with you a powerful reframe for how you should actually be thinking about time in an exam. If I ask most of you what you're trying to do in an exam, you'd probably tell me that you're trying to get as many marks as possible. And while that's technically correct, it's not the right way to think about it. What you're actually trying to do is you're trying to convert time into marks as efficiently as possible. And what that means is you should be constantly asking yourself what the highest yield opportunities to get as many marks in an exam are in the shortest amount of time. And what that often means is skipping a 6-marker that you know will take you a very long time to answer. Of course, as the exam goes on, you're going to be answering lower and lower yield questions, but many of you are only answering them, running out of time, and leaving lots of marks on the table. So the metric that you should be optimizing for is marks per minute. You're trying to get as many marks in the lowest amount of time. Now, on average, a rule of thumb is that you should aim to get at least 1 mark every minute. But you can calculate this for your exact paper by taking the number of marks available divided by the total amount of time. Okay, let's move on to the strategies now. You should aim to implement these one at a time in order, and once you've mastered it, move on to the next one. The first one is known as the rule of quarters. And the goal of this strategy is to help you pace yourself throughout an exam. You see, exams are structured such that they escalate in difficulty as the exam goes on. So technically, we should be allocating more time to the second half of the paper than the first half, but what we often do is the opposite. So what you want to do is you want to split your exam into 4 checkpoints where you need to have reached a certain question by each checkpoint. For example, if your exam is 2 hours and there are 20 questions, then splitting that into quarters, you need to have completed 5 questions every half an hour. So throughout an exam, you'd periodically check the clock to see if you're on track, behind, or ahead, so you can pace yourself accordingly. So practically what you do is at the beginning of a paper, you flick to the last page to make a note of the question number, and then you make a table of checkpoints and questions that you need to have achieved at each one. As your exam technique gets better, you should allocate 20% of the total time to reviewing your answers at the end of the paper. Now bear in mind that not all questions are worth the same number of marks in a paper, but because they're roughly the same, on average, throughout an exam, this strategy will work most of the time. However, if you happen to be doing a paper where this is not the case, for example, you have a section of MCQ questions at the beginning, or you've got an essay to do at the end, then you're going to have to modify this method. For example, in A-Level chemistry, in OCR, they have 15 questions at the beginning, which are MCQs. So you should allocate a checkpoint of 20 minutes to answering those MCQ questions, and then split the rest of the exam into 4 checkpoints accordingly. If you're not sure how to do this for your paper, just leave a comment down below and I can help you. The next strategy is known as strategic skipping, and this one is massive. I can't tell you how many of you, probably 95% or more, do questions in order in an exam without skipping any of them. And it sounds counterintuitive, but my smartest students ruthlessly skip low yield questions. Now this one is emotionally difficult to implement because you're always told in school to try your hardest, to never give up. And when you skip a question, it can feel like you're giving up. If you spent more than half the time allocated to a question and you still have no idea how to answer it, just skip it. It's quite possible that you could be spending another 5 to 10 minutes on this question and still get nowhere, where there are loads of high yield questions in the paper that you could be answering instead, with a view to come back to this question with a fresh perspective where you're more likely to actually be able to get the marks. And the way you know how long a question should take is that you should take the number of marks per minute for that paper and multiply it by the number of marks in that question. So if we go by the 1 mark per minute rule, 1 mark times, let's say it's a 6-mark question, it should take me 6 minutes. So if 3 minutes in, I still don't know how to answer it, I'm just going to skip it. Now the last technique is known as the 3/ system. And at this point, your exam technique should have gotten pretty advanced and you've implemented strategic skipping and you've gotten to a point where you can get through the entire paper without running over time. And now you need the system to prioritize what questions you're going to go over when you're doing them again. So the way it works is that after each question that you answer, under the question number, either put 1/, meaning that the question is so easy that you'd be happy to never go over this question again. 2/ if you think the question went all right, you think you've picked up some marks, but you'd like to go over it again to check your answer and to add a few extra details. Or 3/ if you think this question was really difficult, I have next to no idea what I'm doing. I think I've picked up little or no marks. Okay? And so you do that for every question. And when you get to the end of the paper, you're now reviewing questions again. And what you want to do is you want to start by going over all the 3/ questions. And the idea is that 3/ questions are the highest yield. They're where you could pick up the most number of marks. And what I'll find is that a lot of students will go over the 3/ question again and say, oh, this wasn't that difficult. I just had to do this. And that's the beauty of looking at it from a fresh perspective, where you're now thinking of new approaches that you probably wouldn't have when you were tunnel visioning the first time you tried to answer it. So then you update the difficulty as you go through it again. So 3/ you say, okay, maybe now it's 1/ because it's easy. And then you go over the next 3/ and you do that for the entire paper. And then after that, you go over all the 2/ questions. And then finally, if you get time, you go over the 1/ questions. Good exam technique would involve going over all the 2 and 3/ questions and generally being able to go over the paper once or twice at the end. The great thing about this strategy is that it makes it much easier cognitively to skip a question if you're literally making a note on the paper that you're going to come back to it. Do all of these and I promise you that your time management will become better than anyone else in your schools. You'd be going from the bottom 90% who don't have any time management strategies into the top 10%. But to get into the top 1%, what you need to do is implement this bonus technique, which I promised you, which is you need to develop the skill of time awareness. Time awareness is the ability to have a vague sense of time as it passes in the exam, where you feel like you've spent too little or too much on a question, where you know that roughly 5 minutes has passed since you started. And while it's the most important technique of all, it's also the hardest to develop because you need to get started from early. The way that you develop it is whenever you get an opportunity to time yourself while you're doing questions, do it. While you're doing homework or while you're doing past papers for practice, set a timer. And when you're done with the question or you're done with the paper, think about how long you think you've spent on that question. And then compare that to what you see on the timer. Is it very far off? Of course, no one's going to know exactly down to the right second how long they spent on the question. But are you roughly in the same ballpark? And did you spend the right amount of time given how many marks the question's worth? If you develop time awareness in conjunction with these 3 strategies, you'll be top of your game when it comes to time management. If you found this video useful, subscribe and like, and click here to watch the next one in the exam technique series. This one's going to be about question analysis. So it's all about how you interpret and break down questions to set yourself up to maximize the number of marks you can get. I'll see you in the next one.